The Oka Crisis officially ended in September 1990. The barricades were dismantled, the soldiers withdrew, and the Mohawk people of Kanesatake, who had stood against the full force of the Canadian state for 78 days, began to leave. But what awaited them beyond the military lines was not safety. It was humiliation. As the Mohawk men, women, and children were escorted away from their own land, they encountered crowds of angry civilians lining the roads. These civilians were not soldiers or police officers. They were ordinary Canadian citizens, residents of nearby communities who had been fed months of negative news coverage portraying the Mohawk as violent aggressors. Instead of seeing them as people defending their sacred land, they saw enemies. As the vehicles carrying Mohawk families passed by, the crowds began to throw stones. They hurled rocks, sticks, and bottles at the windows. Glass shattered. Injuries followed. Elders who had gone days without food or sleep were struck by flying debris. Children who had spent weeks living under siege watched their parents and grandparents bleed. Mothers shielded their young ones from the shards as stones smashed into windshields and side windows. The military convoys escorting the Mohawk out did little to intervene. In some cases, soldiers simply stood by and watched. In others, they struggled to hold back the crowds but failed to prevent the violence. For the Mohawk people, this was one of the most painful moments of the entire crisis. They had endured the armed raids, they had survived the siege, they had stood unbroken under the threat of guns and tanks. But this, being attacked by civilians, ordinary people from neighboring towns, revealed a truth that was even harder to accept. The violence was not just in the government, it was in the society itself. The stones thrown at them symbolized the deep systemic racism that Indigenous peoples have faced and continue to face in Canada. It was not about political conflict anymore. It was not about negotiations or land claims. It was about who was seen as human and who was not.